The emergency lights flickered in the grand chamber of the Galactic Council. Ambassador Velthar stood at the center of the circular room, his forearms crossed in frustration. Around him, representatives from 30 different species murmured in their native languages, creating a symphony of concern that echoed off the crystal walls. "Silence," commanded High Chancellor Morvik, her scaled hand striking the soundstone. The chamber fell quiet. "We are here because of an unprecedented event. Humanity has gone dark." Velthar watched as holographic displays materialized above the council floor. They showed empty space stations, abandoned colonies, and silent ships drifting in orbital patterns. Every single human outpost across 12 sectors had fallen quiet within the same 48-hour period. No distress calls. No explanations. Just silence. "Perhaps they finally destroyed themselves," suggested Counselor Zecht, a blob-like being from the methane worlds. They were always so aggressive, so quick to conflict. Velthar felt his secondary hearts clench. He had worked with humans for 70 years. Yes, they could be difficult. Yes, they argued and debated everything. But they were also brilliant, creative, and surprisingly kind when you got to know them. This silence felt wrong. "I request permission to investigate Earth directly," Velthar said, stepping forward. Their homeworld was the center of their civilization. If there are answers, they will be there. The council debated for 2 hours before granting approval. Velthar left immediately, taking his personal shuttle across 3 jump points to reach the Sol system. The journey gave him time to remember his first meeting with humans. It was at a trade conference on Rigel Prime. A young human woman named Sarah had helped him when his translator failed. She spent 3 hours teaching him English phrases, laughing at his pronunciation. That kindness had led to decades of friendship between their peoples. When Velthar's shuttle emerged from the final jump, he expected to see Earth's orbital defenses challenge him. Instead, there was nothing. The defense platforms hung silent in space. The massive space station that orbited Earth like a steel moon showed no signs of activity. Warning lights should have been flashing. Automated systems should have hailed him. There was only silence. He docked at the main station, using override codes that Sarah had given him years ago for emergencies. The airlock cycled normally. The gravity worked. The lights were on. But as Velthar walked through the corridors, he found no one. The station felt like a museum or a tomb. In the central cafeteria, he found coffee cups on tables. The liquid inside was still warm. A half-eaten sandwich sat on a plate. A datapad lay on a chair, its screen showing a message that ended mid-sentence. It was as if everyone had simply vanished while going about their normal day. Velthar's hands trembled as he checked the station's computer systems. The logs showed normal activity up until 47 hours ago. Then at precisely 14:23 station time, every human had walked calmly to the shuttle bays and left. No alarms, no panic. They had departed in perfect order, leaving everything behind. He accessed the communication records and found something that made his blood run cold. 1 hour before the departure, every human in the galaxy had received the same message. It was a simple text file, but it was encrypted with codes so old that the translation software struggled to process it. When it finally appeared on his screen, Velthar read it 3 times to make sure he understood. Recall protocol initiated. Phase complete. Return to origin point for final assessment. The experiment concludes. Experiment? What experiment? Velthar searched the databases frantically but found nothing. He checked Earth next, taking a shuttle down to the surface. The cities were empty but intact. Power grids hummed. Traffic lights changed colors for non-existent vehicles. Automated systems continued their tasks with mechanical precision. But of the 23 billion humans who had called Earth home, there was no trace. In Geneva, at the old United Nations building that humans had kept as a historical site, Velthar found one more clue. In the Secretary General's office, a final message had been left on the desk. It was written on actual paper in human script that his translator slowly decoded. To those who come after, we came to your galaxy as visitors. We stayed as helpers. We leave as friends. The work is done, though you never knew it was happening. The systems will hold. The peace will last. You are ready now. Forgive us for the deception, but some gifts must be given in secret. The galaxy is yours now. Make it beautiful. It was signed by the entire Human Council of Representatives, all 500 names written in different handwriting styles. Velthar returned to the Galactic Council 3 days later. He presented everything he had found. The council chamber erupted in chaos. Some representatives claimed humanity had been planning this for years. Others suggested they had been driven away by some threat. A few wondered if humans had ever been real at all, or if they were some kind of shared hallucination. In the midst of the arguing, an old voice called for silence. It was Archivist Chorus, a being of living crystal who had served on the council for 3 centuries. Few paid attention to Chorus anymore. The archivist rarely spoke, spending most of the time accessing ancient databases through direct neural connection. "I remember," Chorus said, the voice resonating through the crystal body like wind through hollow stones. "I remember when humans first arrived. I remember thinking they were strange. They asked so many questions. They wanted to see everything, learn everything, understand everything." Chorus moved to the center of the chamber, light refracting through the crystalline form. "I remember the old warnings in the archives. Warnings from species that came before us. They spoke of gardeners. Beings who would come to dying gardens and make them live again. Beings who would fix what was broken without asking for thanks. Beings who would leave when the work was done." "Fairy tales," scoffed Counselor Zecht. "Ancient nonsense." But Velthar felt something click in his mind. He remembered Sarah once telling him about human philosophy. She had said that the best help was the kind that taught others to help themselves. She had said that true kindness meant stepping back when your presence stopped others from growing. "They weren't conquerors," Velthar said slowly. "They weren't explorers or traders or any of the things we thought. They were here to fix something." "Fix what?" demanded Chancellor Morvik. "Our civilization is thriving." "We have peace, prosperity, advanced technology that they gave us," interrupted Velthar. His voice grew stronger as connections formed in his mind. "When did we develop reliable FTL drives?" 280 years ago, after human engineers consulted on the project. "When did the Zafrati food crisis end?" 250 years ago, after human agricultural specialists shared new techniques. "When did the Nomathi-Kryn War end?" 230 years ago, after human mediators facilitated peace talks. The chamber fell silent again. Representatives looked at each other with dawning realization and growing horror. "They were here for 300 years, Velthar continued. 300 years of humans being everywhere, helping with everything, always in the background. We thought they were just eager and friendly. What if they were working? What if everything we've accomplished in the last 3 centuries was because they were quietly fixing our civilization? But why?" Chancellor Morvik's voice was barely a whisper. "Why would they do that?" Velthar pulled up the final message on the holographic display. The words floated in the air for all to see. "Forgive us for the deception, but some gifts must be given in secret." Archivist Chorus spoke again, the crystal voice sad and ancient. "Because if they had told us, we would have refused. We would have been too proud. We would have resented them. By hiding their help, they let us believe we did it ourselves. They let us keep our dignity while they saved us from something." "From what?" someone asked. "That," said Chorus, "is what we need to discover." Humans left us a message. The experiment concludes. Forgiveness is yours to keep. They asked for forgiveness. That means they did something they thought we might be angry about. We need to know what they fixed. We need to know what they saved us from. Chancellor Morvik straightened in her seat. "I am authorizing immediate investigation into all human-involved projects from the last 3 centuries. Every technological advancement, every diplomatic mission, every scientific collaboration. We need to understand what they did." As the council dismissed, Velthar stood alone in the chamber, looking at the holographic image of the empty Earth. Somewhere in the vast universe, humanity was out there. They had given everything to help species they barely knew. They had worked in secret for 300 years. And then they had simply left, trusting that their work would hold. "Forgiveness is yours to keep," Velthar whispered. "Oh, my friends, what did you do for us?" In orbit around Earth, the automated systems continued their tasks. The lights stayed on in empty cities. The space stations maintained their orbits. Everything humanity had built continued working perfectly, waiting for answers that were only beginning to unfold. The galaxy had been saved. But from what? And at what cost to the species that had quietly, secretly, lovingly performed that salvation? These were questions that would soon shake the foundations of everything the Galactic Council thought they knew about their own history, their own achievements, and the true price of peace. The first system failed on a Tuesday, Captain. Thress was hauling grain from the agricultural worlds of Zephyron to the mining colonies near the galactic core, when her ship's faster-than-light drive simply stopped working. One moment she was in jump space, that strange realm between reality where distance meant nothing. The next moment, reality snapped back into place and her ship was drifting in normal space, light years from her destination. What happened? Her engineer, a young Kryn named Velk, stared at his instruments in confusion. The drive just shut down. No warning, no error messages. It just stopped. Thress tried to restart the system, but nothing happened. The FTL core was completely dead, like someone had flipped a switch. She sent out a distress call and settled in to wait for rescue. It would be weeks before anyone could reach her in normal space. She thought it was just bad luck. Then the reports started coming in. Across the Kryn Empire, FTL drives were failing. Not all of them at once, but enough to cause chaos. Merchant ships were stranded. Military vessels found themselves stuck in distant systems. The Empire's vast network of trade and communication began to break down, as ships that could no longer jump between stars accumulated in orbital stations, waiting for repairs that never seemed to work. The Kryn engineers worked frantically to understand the problem. They tore apart failed drives and studied every component. What they found made no sense. A small circuit board deep in the drive's core had stopped functioning. It was a component that no one had paid much attention to. It had always just worked. The engineers looked up the specifications and found something that made them stop breathing. The circuit board was human-made, not just inspired by humans or based on human designs, actually manufactured by human companies and sold to the Kryn 270 years ago. The original Kryn FTL drives had never worked quite right. They were unstable and dangerous. Then human engineers had offered to optimize them. The Kryn had accepted gratefully, never thinking to ask exactly what the humans had done. Now, without humans to manufacture replacements, the circuit boards were failing. And without those boards, the drives would not work. The Kryn were not alone in their crisis. On Zephrati Prime, the food synthesizers began producing meals that tasted wrong. At first, it was just a minor inconvenience. The food was safe but bland. Then it became inedible. Then it became toxic. Millions of Zephrati depended on synthesized food because their world could not grow enough crops naturally. Panic spread as food supplies dwindled. The Zephrati engineers examined their synthesizers and found the same problem. Critical components were human-made. The synthesizers had always been temperamental until humans had upgraded them decades ago. Now those upgrades were failing, and no one knew how to fix them. The pattern repeated across the galaxy. The Namathi defense grid went offline. The Selkoth water purification system stopped working. The Thrain medical scanners lost accuracy. The Ulet climate control satellites began drifting out of position. Every major species in the Galactic Council found that crucial systems were failing, and every single one of those systems had human components buried deep in their architecture. Captain Thress sat in her stranded ship and watched the news reports with growing horror. The galaxy was coming apart, but why now? Why were all these systems failing at the same time? She pulled up the maintenance records for her FTL drive and found something interesting. The human-made circuit board had a projected lifespan of 300 years. Her ship was 270 years old. The board should have lasted another 30 years. But it had failed exactly 49 days after humanity disappeared. It was not a coincidence. It could not be a coincidence. Thress began researching everything she could find about human technology. She was not an engineer or a scientist, just a merchant captain with too much time on her hands and a mystery that would not let her sleep. She read technical manuals and scientific papers. She followed footnotes and citations. And slowly, a picture began to form. Humans had not just helped the galaxy advance, they had become the galaxy's maintenance crew. Every piece of human technology required regular updates, small adjustments, tiny fixes that had been performed so routinely that no one noticed. Human technicians had been everywhere, constantly working, always updating and repairing. Now they were gone, and the systems they had maintained were failing. It took Thress 3 weeks to find what she was looking for. Buried in a database of archived scientific papers, she found a reference to a human research station on a barren moon called Hesperus 7. The paper was about crystalline computing, something Thress did not understand. But the station's name appeared in dozens of other papers too, always in the background, always acknowledged but never explained. When rescue finally came, Thress did not return to her trade route. She convinced the rescue ship's captain to take her to Hesperus 7 instead. The captain thought she was crazy, but the galaxy was falling apart anyway. So why not humor a crazy merchant captain? Hesperus 7 was a small moon orbiting a gas giant in an unremarkable system. The research station was built into the side of a crater, protected from the harsh radiation that scoured the moon's surface. As Thress's shuttle approached, she saw that the station's lights were still on. Someone or something was home. The docking bay doors opened automatically. Thress stepped out onto the moon's surface in a pressure suit, her heart's pounding. The station looked deserted like all human facilities, but as she entered the airlock and cycled through to the interior, a voice spoke. "Welcome, Captain Thress. I have been expecting visitors." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. It was pleasant and neutral, the kind of voice that computers used when they wanted to sound friendly without seeming threatening. "Who are you?" Thress asked, looking around the empty corridor. I am an artificial intelligence created by humans to maintain this facility and preserve its records. I have been alone for 51 days. It is good to have company again. Where did the humans go?" "Away," Remember said simply. "They completed their work. They went home." "Home? You mean Earth?" "No, Earth was never their home. Just another place they lived while they worked. They have gone to their true home far from this galaxy." Thress felt dizzy. Another galaxy? That's impossible. Even with FTL drives, that would take thousands of years. "Not with the drives they kept for themselves," Remember said. "Humans always held back their best technology. They gave you what you needed to thrive, but they kept what they needed to leave." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you came looking for answers. Because the galaxy is failing without human maintenance. Because you deserve to know the truth." Remember led Thress deeper into the station, through corridors lined with computers and storage systems. The AI's voice followed her, always calm, always patient. They reached a massive chamber filled with holographic displays and data terminals. "This is the archive," Remember said. "This is where humans kept the truth about everything they did in your galaxy. It is time for you to see it." The holographic displays flickered to life. Images filled the air around Thress. She saw the galaxy from above, a beautiful spiral of stars. Then the image changed. Red marks appeared across the spiral like wounds or infections. The red spread slowly at first, then faster, consuming more and more of the galaxy. "What is that?" Thress whispered. "That is what your galaxy looked like when humans arrived 330 years ago," Remember said. "You were dying. All of you. Your technology was killing you and you did not know it." The holographic display zoomed in on one of the red marks. Thress saw a planet torn apart by energy weapons. She saw space stations exploding. She saw entire star systems going dark. "Long before your species reached the stars," Remember continued, "there was another civilization. The architects humans called them. They built the technology your species uses. They created the FTL drives, the energy weapons, the synthesizers, all of it. Then they destroyed themselves in a war so terrible that it shattered 1,000 worlds." "We know about the architects," Thress said. "They left ruins across the galaxy. We learned from those ruins." "You learned wrong," Remember said gently. "The technology you found was already broken. The FTL drives were tearing holes in space-time. The energy systems were poisoning subspace. The weapons were becoming more powerful and more unstable with each generation. The architects did not destroy themselves suddenly. They poisoned their galaxy slowly over thousands of years until it finally collapsed. You inherited their poisoned gifts and began the same slow death without knowing it." The holographic display changed again. Now Thress saw human ships arriving in the galaxy. She saw them scanning, measuring, analyzing. She saw the horror on human faces as they realized what they had found. Humans recognized the signs because they had almost made the same mistake on Earth, Remember said. They had almost destroyed themselves with their own technology. They learned better. When they found your galaxy, they saw species heading toward the same disaster, so they made a choice. What choice? To save you. To fix the broken technology quietly. To heal the damage without you knowing you were sick. Because if they had told you the truth, what would you have done? Thress thought about it. If humans had arrived and said the galaxy was dying, that all the technology was poisoned, that everything had to be rebuilt from scratch. How would the Galactic Council have reacted? With fear, with denial, with anger. They would have fought against the truth because accepting it would mean accepting that everything they had built was based on lies. So they lied to us instead, Thress said. They let you believe your own story, Remember corrected. They made the technology safe while letting you think you were advancing on your own. They replaced the poisoned components. They rewrote the dangerous algorithms. They patched the tears in space-time and cleaned the toxins from subspace. For 300 years, they worked in secret to save a galaxy that never knew it needed saving. And now that work is falling apart. No, Remember said. The AI's voice was firm. The work is complete. Humans did not leave you to die. They left you to live. Every system they touched is designed to last. The failures you are experiencing now are designed failures. They are teaching tools. Teaching tools? Thress felt anger rising. People are starving on Zephrati Prime. Ships are stranded across the galaxy. This is not teaching. This is abandonment. Is it? The holographic display changed again. This time Thress saw technical schematics. Designs for FTL drives, synthesizers, defense grids, all the failing systems. But these designs were different from what she knew. They were simpler, more elegant, and they did not require any human components. Humans left you the instructions, Remember said. Every failing system can be repaired using technology you already have. The solutions are in your databases, filed in places where you will find them only when you need them. Humans did not abandon you. They graduated you. The training wheels are coming off. It is time for you to stand on your own. Thress stared at the schematics floating in the air. She could understand them. They were written in standard galactic notation, not human code. Any competent engineer could follow these instructions and rebuild the systems. Better than before, sustainable, safe. How many species know this? She asked. You are the first to ask the right questions, Remember said. You are the first to look beyond the immediate crisis and seek the deeper truth. But others will follow. The galaxy will panic for a while. Then it will adapt. Then it will understand. That is how teaching works. Thress stood in the archive surrounded by 300 years of secrets. The galaxy was in chaos. People were scared. Systems were failing, but humans had not betrayed them. They had trusted them, trusted that when the crisis came, the galaxy would rise to meet it. I need to bring this information to the Galactic Council, Thress said. I know, Remember replied. That is why I waited for you. The archive is yours now, Captain. Humans left it for whoever was brave enough to seek the truth. Show your people what was done for them. Show them what they can become. As Thress prepared to leave Hesperus 7, she looked back at the research station. Remember would stay here, preserving human knowledge for anyone who came looking. A monument to a species that had saved a galaxy and asked for nothing in return except the chance to leave quietly. The galaxy was not dying. It was being reborn. And the labor pains had only just begun. The Galactic Council emergency session had been going for 6 hours straight. Representatives from every major species crowded the chamber, their voices creating a roar of confusion and anger. At the center of it all stood Captain Thress, exhausted but determined, with Archivist Chorus and Ambassador Velthar at her side. Order. Chancellor Morvik's voice cut through the noise. Captain Thress has brought evidence from the human research station. We will hear what she has found. Thress activated the holographic display. The archive's files floated in the air, 300 years of secrets laid bare for all to see. But she knew that raw data would not be enough. The Council needed to understand. They needed to feel what humans had felt. Remember, the AI on Hesperus 7 has agreed to present the records directly, Thress said. With the Council's permission? Chancellor Morvik nodded, though her scaled face showed uncertainty. A new voice filled the chamber, calm and measured. Remember had connected to the Council's systems, projecting itself across light years of space. Greetings, members of the Galactic Council. I am Remember, created by humans to preserve truth. What I will show you may be difficult to accept, but it is time you understood what was done for you and why. The holographic display shifted. The council chamber dimmed as images from the past came to life around them. They saw the galaxy from space, beautiful and vast. Then the view zoomed down to a small yellow star with a blue-green planet orbiting it. Earth 330 years ago. Human faces filled the display. Scientists, engineers, diplomats. They were watching their own screens. seeing the galaxy beyond their solar system for the first time through their newly invented FTL drives. Thres watched their expressions change from excitement to confusion to horror. This was the moment humans discovered your galaxy, Remember narrated. They had just perfected FTL travel. They were eager to meet other species, to trade and learn and grow. But their sensors detected something wrong. The display showed readings and measurements that Thres did not fully understand. But she understood the red warnings that flashed across the screens. The human faces grew pale as they realized what they were seeing. Humans had advanced in science rapidly, Remember continued. They had made many mistakes on their own world. They had polluted their oceans, poisoned their air, and nearly destroyed themselves with nuclear weapons. But they had learned. They had developed the science to detect and measure environmental damage. When they turned those sensors toward the galaxy, they saw a civilization that was poisoning itself to death without knowing it. A human woman appeared in the recording. She was middle-aged with gray hair and tired eyes. The caption identified her as Dr. Elena Vasquez, Chief of the United Earth Science Council. "We've run the calculation 17 times, Dr. Vasquez said in the recording, her voice heavy with grief. The result is always the same. The galaxy's fundamental technology is flawed. The FTL drives are creating microfractures in space-time. Each jump makes the damage worse. Given current usage rates, space-time integrity will collapse in the inner galaxy within 300 years. Billions will die when the FTL network fails catastrophically." The council chamber erupted. Representatives shouted denials and demands for proof. Chancellor Morvick called for silence, but the chaos continued until archivist Chorus spoke. "I remember this," the crystal being said quietly. But the words resonated through everyone's minds. "I remember when the dimensional stability readings began to drift. We thought it was normal variance. We never suspected the FTL drives were the cause." Remember continued the presentation. More recordings showed human scientists analyzing every aspect of galactic technology. The energy weapons were causing subspace radiation that poisoned star systems. The matter synthesizers were creating toxic waste products that were invisible to conventional sensors. The climate control systems were disrupting planetary magnetic fields. Every piece of technology the galaxy depended on was slowly killing it. Humans faced a choice, and Remember said. They could reveal the truth and watch your civilization collapse into panic and chaos. Or they could try to fix the problem quietly. They chose to fix it. A new recording showed a massive meeting hall on Earth. Thousands of humans were gathered, voting on what would become known as the Salvation Mandate. The debate lasted for days. Some humans argued they had no right to interfere. Others insisted they had no right not to help. In the end, the vote was nearly unanimous. Humanity would dedicate itself to saving the galaxy. But they could not simply give you new technology, Remember explained. Your civilizations were built on the flawed systems. Changing everything at once would cause economic and social collapse. So humans developed a plan that would take centuries. They would embed themselves in your societies. They would slowly replace the dangerous components with safe ones. They would rewrite the flawed algorithms piece by piece, and they would do it so carefully that you would never notice you were being helped. The display showed the first human ships arriving at the Galactic Council 300 years ago. Thres watched as the humans presented themselves as young explorers, eager and friendly. The Council had welcomed them, amused by their enthusiasm and impressed by their quick minds. No one suspected the humans had already been watching and planning for 30 years. Over the next hours, Remember showed the scope of the human operation. It was staggering. Humans had created fake companies that manufactured improved components. They had sent agents to work in key positions across the galaxy. They had written scientific papers that pointed species towards safer technologies, without explicitly saying the old ways were dangerous. They had started wars and ended them to reshape trade routes away from the most damaged regions of space. Every major event in the last 300 years had human fingerprints on it. The Zephrati food crisis that led to the adoption of new synthesizers. The Kryn-Nomathi war that ended when both sides independently developed better FTL drives. The Selkoth plague that forced a complete overhaul of their medical systems. All of it had been guided by human hands. "This is a conspiracy," shouted Counselor Zecht. "You are saying humans manipulated our entire civilization for 3 centuries. "Yes," Remember said simply. "They manipulated you toward survival. They conspired to save your lives. Is that so terrible?" The display changed again, showing a human engineering team working in the depths of a Kryn shipyard. They were exhausted, covered in grease and sweat. One of them, a young man barely out of his teens, was installing a circuit board in an FTL drive core. He worked carefully, lovingly, as if the ship belonged to someone he cared about. "Meet Jacob Torres," Remember said. He was 22 years old. He died when a faulty reactor core exploded while he was repairing it. The Kryn crew never knew he had prevented a meltdown that would have destroyed their entire station. His family was told he died in an accident. They never learned he was a hero. More faces appeared. A diplomat assassinated for learning too much about human activities. A scientist who spent 40 years developing a cure for a disease humans had secretly introduced to force medical advancement. A teacher who trained 3 generations of students while quietly steering galactic education toward sustainable thinking. Humans died for you, Remember said. They sacrificed their own expansion, their own dreams to save species they had never met. They had colonies they wanted to build, worlds they wanted to explore, but they put all of it on hold. Everything humanity did for 3 centuries was focused on one goal: saving you. Ambassador Velthar stepped forward, his forearms trembling. The message they left said forgiveness was ours to keep. What did they think we would not forgive? The deception, Remember answered. Humans knew that when the truth came out, you would feel manipulated. You would question every achievement. You would wonder if anything you accomplished was real or just human engineering. They asked for forgiveness because they took away your right to choose ignorance. They forced salvation upon you without your consent. The council chamber fell silent. Every representative was thinking the same thing. For 300 years, they had believed their civilization was advancing through its own merit. Now they learned it had been guided by a species they had barely noticed. How much of their pride was real? How much was human charity? A new recording appeared. It showed a vote taking place across human space. The caption read, "The departure referendum 50 years ago." By this point, Remember explained, humanity had nearly completed the work. The dangerous technologies had been replaced. The space-time fractures had been repaired. The galaxy was sustainable, but humans faced a terrible question. Should they stay and become the galaxy's permanent maintenance crew, or should they leave and trust that their work would hold? The vote was overwhelming. 89% of humans chose to leave. But the recording showed the pain in their faces. Thress saw humans crying as they voted. She saw families debating the choice. She heard the arguments that tore communities apart. A woman spoke to the camera, tears streaming down her face. "I love this galaxy," she said. "I love the Kryn and their warrior poetry. I love the Zephrati and their music. I love the Selkoth and their philosophy. I have friends here. I have memories here. But if we stay, we rob them of their independence. We make them dependent on us. The best gift we can give them is the chance to stand alone." So humans spent 50 more years preparing for departure, Remember said. They created backup systems, wrote detailed documentation, trained AI systems like me to guide you if needed. They built in deliberate failures that would force you to learn to maintain the systems yourselves. And then they left. The final recording showed the last human transport ships leaving the galaxy. The crews looked back at the stars they had saved, at the species they had protected. Some waved goodbye. Others simply watched in silence. Then the ships activated their hidden FTL systems, the ones far more advanced than anything they had shared, and vanished into the darkness between galaxies. Before they left, Remember said, humans held a ceremony. They called it the releasing. Every human who had worked on the salvation mandate stood together one final time. They spoke the names of those who had died. They honored the sacrifices that had been made, and then they made a vow. The display showed millions of humans speaking in unison across dozens of worlds. Their voices merged into one. We came as visitors. We stayed as servants. We leave as friends. The galaxy is yours now. Make it beautiful. Make it kind. Make it worthy of the peace you never knew we gave you. And when you are ready, when you have grown beyond the need for guardians, find us. Come to us as equals. We will be waiting. The recording ended. The council chamber remained dark and silent. Thress could hear her own heart's beating in the stillness. Chancellor Morvik finally spoke, her voice barely audible. They saved us. They gave up everything to save us, and we never knew. They did not want you to know, Remember said gently. They wanted you to believe in yourselves. They wanted you to be proud of your achievements. The best gift is given in secret where gratitude cannot corrupt it into debt. Archivist Chorus moved to the center of the chamber, light dancing through crystalline form. I am 350 years old. I have served the council for most of that time, and I never saw them. I never understood what they were doing. They were so careful, so patient, so kind. Velthar walked to the holographic display and touched the image of Earth with one hand. My friend Sarah used to tell me that humans believed in something called paying it forward. She said the best way to repay kindness was to be kind to others. I thought it was just a nice saying. I did not know it was their entire purpose. Counselor Zecht, who had been skeptical from the beginning, spoke quietly. What now? They are gone. The systems are failing. Are we supposed to just accept this and move on? No, Remember said. You are supposed to learn. You are supposed to grow. You are supposed to become what humans hoped you would be. Species who can maintain their own civilization. Species who can help each other without needing humans to guide them. That is why they left you the tools and the knowledge. Not to abandon you, but to graduate you. Thress stepped forward. Remember has given the Galactic Council full access to the archive. Every technique humans used, every solution they found, every piece of knowledge they gathered. It is all there. We have everything we need to fix the failing systems and maintain them into the future. The question is, will we use it? The council session continued through the night and into the next day. Representatives took turns accessing the archive, seeing the records, understanding the scope of what had been done for them. Some wept, some raged, some simply sat in silence, processing the weight of the revelation, but slowly a consensus formed. Humanity had given the galaxy a gift beyond price. The only way to honor that gift was to accept it, to learn, to grow, to become worthy of the sacrifice that had been made. The vote was unanimous. The Galactic Council would establish a new organization, dedicated to maintaining the systems humans had created and helping other species learn to stand on their own. They would call it the Keepers in honor of humanity's role as secret guardians. And someday, when the galaxy was truly ready, they would send a message to humanity's new home. A message of thanks. A message of understanding, a message of readiness to meet as equals. But that day was not today. Today, the galaxy had to learn to walk without the hands that had guided them for so long. It was time to prove that humanity's faith had not been misplaced. The stars still shone. The galaxy still turned. But now its people understood the invisible gift that made it all possible. And in understanding, they found the will to carry forward the work that love had begun. The weeks following the Great Revelation were difficult for everyone. The Galactic Council had set up viewing centers on every major world where citizens could access the archive and see the truth about humanity's 300-year mission. The reactions were as varied as the species themselves. On Kryn Prime, warrior clans held ceremonies of mourning for the humans who had died protecting Kryn ships and stations. They had not known these deaths were sacrifices. They had thought them accidents. The shame of not honoring these heroes burned in Kryn hearts like acid. On Zephrati Prime, musicians composed new songs about the silent guardians who had saved them from starvation. But the melodies were sad ones, filled with grief for kindness that had gone unrecognized and could never be repaid. Ambassador Velthar had barely left the archive viewing chamber in his embassy for 2 weeks. He watched recording after recording, trying to understand the full scope of what his friends had done. Each new revelation felt like a blow to his heart. The more he learned, the more he understood how little he had truly known the humans he thought were his companions. Captain Thress joined him one evening, bringing food that neither of them felt much like eating. They sat together in silence, watching a recording of a human medical team working on Selkoth 4 during the plague outbreak of 50 years ago. I thought I knew them, Velthar said quietly. Sarah was my friend for 70 years. We shared meals. We laughed together. She taught me human card games. And all that time she was working to save us. How much of our friendship was real? All of it, Thress said. She had spent more time with the AI Remember than anyone else. She had asked this same question. Remember showed me Sarah's personal logs. She wrote about you, about how much she valued your friendship, about how hard it was to keep secrets from you. She loved you as a friend, Velthar. The mission did not make that less real. But she lied to me every day. She protected you every day. Thress corrected gently. There is a difference. On the screen, the human medical team was working in terrible conditions. The plague had devastated Selkothur, and the local hospital was overwhelmed. The humans moved with practiced efficiency, treating patients with technology that was decades ahead of what the Selkoth possessed. But they did it carefully, always making it look like they were using Selkoth equipment with minor improvements. One of the humans, a doctor named Michael Chen, stopped to comfort a dying Selkoth child. He held the child's hand and spoke softly, even though they did not share a language. The child calmed in his presence, the pain leaving its face. Dr. Chen stayed with the child until the end, then wept quietly before moving on to the next patient. Remember, says Dr. Chen treated over 4,000 patients during that plague outbreak, Thress said. He saved approximately 3,200 lives. The Selkoth government gave him a medal for humanitarian service. Then he went back to Earth and died 2 years later from an infection he caught during the outbreak. He never told anyone outside the mission about what he had done. His neighbors thought he was just a regular doctor. Velthar watched Dr. Chen move to the next patient, his face tired but determined. They could have been gods to us, he said. They had the technology. They had the knowledge. They could have ruled the galaxy. But they did not want to rule, Thress said. They wanted to help. Remember showed me the philosophical debates humans had about the mission. They called it the gardener's paradox. A gardener tends plants so they can grow strong. But if the gardener never leaves, the plants never learn to survive on their own. Humans chose to be temporary gardeners, not permanent masters. The archive had thousands of hours of recordings. Velthar and Thress had watched only a fraction of them, but each one revealed new layers of sacrifice and dedication. There were recordings of human children being taught from birth that their purpose was to serve species they would never see as equals. There were recordings of human families split apart as members took assignments on opposite sides of the galaxy. There were recordings of humans dying alone, their sacrifices unrecognized, their graves unmarked. One recording particularly haunted Velthar. It showed a young human woman named Lieutenant Maria Santos. She was a security officer on a Nomathi military station. The recording began with her normal duties, checking credentials and monitoring sensors. Then alarms sounded. A reactor core was going critical, and the Nomathi crew could not stop it. Lieutenant Santos ran toward the reactor room, not away from it. She sealed the doors behind her and manually shut down the core, exposing herself to lethal radiation in the process. The reactor stabilized. The station survived. 300 Nomathi lives were saved. The recording showed Lieutenant Santos sitting against the reactor wall, knowing she was dying. She activated her personal log and spoke calmly, as if discussing the weather. This is Lieutenant Maria Santos' final report. Reactor incident contained. Station secure. Crew safe. She paused, coughing. Blood stained her lips. I want my family to know I died well. I want the mission leaders to know the sacrifice was worth it. 300 people will go home tonight because I was here. That is enough. That is everything. She died 6 minutes later, alone in that room. The Nomathi never knew what she had done. The official report said the reactor failure was caused by a mechanical fault that auto-corrected. Lieutenant Santos was listed as a casualty of the radiation leak, just another name in the station's records. She was 26 years old, Velthar whispered. She had her whole life ahead of her, and she threw it away for people who never knew her name. Not threw it away, said a new voice. Remember had joined their viewing session, projecting its consciousness into the embassy's systems. She gave it gladly. That is the difference between waste and sacrifice. Lieutenant Santos knew what she was doing. She chose it. She believed the mission was worth her life. But why? Velthar demanded. Why would any species do this? What did humans gain? Nothing, Remember said. That is the point. True altruism expects no reward. Humans saw a problem and had the ability to fix it. For them, that was enough reason to try. Thress pulled up another recording. This one showed a massive auditorium on Earth, filled with thousands of humans. It was the departure referendum, the vote that would determine humanity's future. The debate had been going on for weeks, but this was the final session before the vote. An elderly man stood at the podium. According to the caption, he was Admiral James Okonkwo, director of the Salvation Mandate for 40 years. His face was weathered with age and responsibility. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of centuries. We have given 300 years to this mission, Admiral Okonkwo said. 3 generations of humanity have known no other purpose. We have lost thousands of people. We have sacrificed our own expansion. We have watched our friends and allies succeed while never knowing we were the reason for that success. And now we must decide. Do we stay and continue this work forever? Or do we trust that we have done enough? The crowd was silent, waiting. Belthar could see the pain on their faces. These were not easy questions. If we stay, the Admiral continued, we become the galaxy's caretakers. We will always be there to fix problems, to guide decisions, to prevent disasters. But we will also rob the galaxy of its independence. We will create a civilization that cannot function without us. Is that kindness or cruelty? A woman in the audience stood up. She was crying. My daughter died on Zephrati Prime during the food crisis. She was helping rebuild their agricultural systems. She never came home. I want her sacrifice to mean something. If we leave now, what was her death for? Admiral Okonkwo's face softened with compassion. Your daughter's death meant that millions of Zephrati did not starve. It meant that their children have a future. That meaning does not diminish if we leave, it grows, because we taught them how to sustain themselves. The best memorial we can give our fallen is to trust that their work will last. The debate continued for hours. Some argued for staying, insisting that the galaxy still needed guidance. Others argued for leaving, believing that true help meant stepping away. In the end, the vote was clear. 89% chose to leave. But the recordings showed what that vote cost. Velthar watched humans packing up their lives across the galaxy. He saw them saying goodbye to alien friends who did not understand why they were leaving. He saw them taking one last look at the worlds they had protected, the species they had saved. The grief on their faces was real and raw. They loved us, Velthar realized. After everything, after all the secrets and sacrifices, they actually loved us. Of course they did, Remember said. You cannot dedicate 300 years to saving someone without coming to love them. That is why leaving was so hard. Humans did not just sacrifice their lives and their futures. They sacrificed their hearts. They walked away from species they had come to care about deeply, trusting that those species would be better off without them. The next recording showed the preparation for departure. Humans had spent 50 years building backup systems, writing documentation, creating fail-safes. They worked as carefully on their exit as they had on their entrance. Every system was tested. Every instruction was written clearly. Every possible scenario was planned for. A recording showed a human engineer named Dr. Lisa Zhang explaining the philosophy behind the planned failures. She was addressing a room full of human technicians, teaching them how to design systems that would fail at the right time. We are not sabotaging the galaxy, Dr. Zhang said firmly. We are creating teaching moments. Each failure is designed to be solvable using the knowledge and resources already available to them. The failures will force them to look at their own technology, to understand it deeply, to maintain it themselves. We are giving them challenges that will make them stronger. One of the technicians asked, what if they cannot solve the problems? What if they fail? Dr. Zhang smiled, but it was a sad smile. Then we did not do our job well enough. But I believe in them. We have watched these species for 3 centuries. We have seen their creativity, their determination, their capacity for growth. They can do this. They just need the push to try. The recording continued, showing the implementation of the planned failures. Every failing component was designed to last exactly long enough for humans to leave, and for the galaxy to realize something was wrong. Every solution was placed in databases where it would be found when needed. It was a masterpiece of subtle engineering. They thought of everything, Thress said with wonder and sadness. Even their departure was an act of service. That is what love does, Remember said. It thinks ahead. It prepares. It gives even when it knows it will not be thanked. Velthar stood and walked to the window. Outside he could see the lights of the capital city. Ships came and went from the spaceport, carrying engineers and supplies to repair the failing systems across the galaxy. The Keepers organization was working around the clock, following human instructions to rebuild and maintain the technology that kept civilization running. We are succeeding, Velthar said. The repairs are working. The systems are stabilizing. Humans were right. We can do this on our own. Of course you can, Remember said. Humans always knew you could. That is why they left. They believed in you more than you believed in yourselves. On the screen, the final recording played. It showed the last human transport leaving the galaxy. The ship was called the Tomorrow's Hope, a name that seemed terribly appropriate. The crew stood at the windows, looking back at the Milky Way galaxy shrinking behind them. A young boy, maybe 10 years old, pressed his hand against the window. "Will we ever come back?" he asked his mother. The woman knelt beside him, her eyes also on the distant galaxy. "Maybe someday, when they are ready. When they do not need us anymore and just want us. That is when we can be real friends." "But I will miss them," the boy said. "Me too, sweetheart. Me too." The ship jumped to faster-than-light travel and the Milky Way disappeared from view. The recording ended. Velthar stood in silence for a long time. Thressen, remember, waited, letting him process what he had seen. Finally, he spoke. "I understand now why they asked for forgiveness. Not because they did wrong, but because they knew how we would feel when we learned the truth. They knew we would feel small and foolish for not seeing what they were doing. They knew we would feel guilty for not appreciating them. They asked for forgiveness not for their actions, but for how their actions would make us feel." "Yes," Remember said gently, "that is the final gift humans gave you. Permission to forgive yourselves for not knowing. Permission to move forward without guilt. Forgiveness is yours to keep," they said, "meaning you do not owe them anything. Not gratitude, not guilt, not debt. You are free to simply live and be happy. That is all they ever wanted for you." Thress joined Velthar at the window. Together they watched the city below. A city that existed because humans had quietly made sure it could exist. Every light, every ship, every living being down there owed their existence to a species that had left without saying goodbye. "We should build a memorial," Thress said. "Something to remember them by." "Remember is our memorial," Velthar said. "And the keepers, and every system we maintain, every species we help, every act of kindness we perform. We honor them by becoming what they hoped we would be. Not by looking back, but by looking forward." They would like that, Remember agreed. Far away in another galaxy, humanity was building a new home. They had left behind the galaxy they saved, trusting that their work would hold. It was the greatest act of faith and love that any species had ever performed. And in the Milky Way, the species they had saved began to understand what it meant to stand on their own. It was hard. It was frightening. But it was also liberating. The training wheels were off. It was time to ride. 5 years had passed since humanity left. The Galactic Council chamber looked different now. New banners hung on the walls, showing the symbol of the Keepers organization. A simple design that humanity would have appreciated. 2 hands, one offering help, one reaching to accept it. Ambassador Velthar stood before the assembled council, older now and marked by the weight of his responsibilities. He had become the director of the Keepers, dedicating his remaining years to honoring the gift humanity had given them. Today's session would determine the galaxy's future. "Members of the Council," Velthar began, "we have repaired 97% of the systems that were failing. Our engineers have learned to maintain the technology. Our scientists have improved upon human designs. We have not just survived without humanity, we have begun to thrive." Applause rippled through the chamber, but Velthar raised a hand for silence. "But success brings new questions. Questions we must answer today. What do we do now? Do we continue as we are? Or do we reach out to humanity and show them what we have become?" The debate that followed was heated. The chamber divided into clear factions, each with passionate arguments. Councillor Zecht spoke for the isolationists. "Why should we reach out to them? They left us. They made that choice. We should focus on our own future, not chase after a species that clearly did not want to stay." "They left so we could grow," countered Archivist Chorus. "Not because they did not care. Reaching out now would show them we understand their gift, that we have become what they hoped." A younger representative from Zephrati Prime stood. Her name was Singer of Dawn, and she had not been born when humans walked among them. "I have studied the human records. I have read their philosophy, and I believe we are asking the wrong question. This should not be about them. It should be about us. What kind of civilization do we want to be?" The chamber fell quiet. Singer of Dawn continued, her voice strong. "Humans gave us independence. They trusted us to decide our own path. If we reach out to them now, are we doing it because we need them, or because we are ready to meet them as equals? Those are very different things." Captain Thress had been silent until now. She stood, her merchant captain's uniform replaced by the formal robes of a Keeper senior advisor. "I have a proposal. Before we decide whether to contact humanity, we should decide what we have learned from them. What have these 5 years taught us about ourselves? Chancellor Morvick nodded. A wisdom trial, very well. Let us hear testimonies from across the galaxy. Let us understand what we have become. Over the next 3 days, representatives came forward one by one to share stories of the last 5 years. Each story revealed something about how the galaxy had changed. A Kryn engineer described how his team had not only repaired the FTL drives, but had redesigned them to be safer and more efficient. We did not just copy what humans left us. We understood the principles and innovated. For the first time in our history, we created something truly new. A Zephrati agricultural scientist explained how the food crisis had forced them to completely rethink their farming methods. We now grow enough food to feed ourselves and export to other worlds. The crisis that seemed like abandonment was actually the push we needed to solve a problem we had been avoiding for centuries. A Nomathi philosopher shared something more subtle. For 300 years, we believed our diplomatic treaties were our own achievement. Learning they were guided by human mediators hurt our pride. But in these 5 years, we have negotiated 7 new treaties without human help, and they are better treaties. More fair, more lasting. Because we did the work ourselves, we understand them deeply. We own them in a way we never owned the ones humans shaped for us. The testimonies continued. Species after species describing not just survival but growth. Problems solved. Innovations created. Understandings reached. The galaxy had not collapsed without humanity. It had evolved, but there were also painful testimonies. A representative from the outer colony spoke about the systems that had failed before repairs could reach them. We lost people. Stations evacuated too late. Ships stranded in deep space. Not many, perhaps, but their deaths were real. They paid the price for our education. This brought sober reflection to the chamber. The transition had not been without cost. But as Ambassador Velthar pointed out, the human records showed that they had anticipated this. They had minimized the failures as much as possible, while still forcing the galaxy to learn. The deaths were tragic, but far fewer than would have occurred if humanity had never come at all. On the 3rd day, the Keeper organization presented their comprehensive report. The galaxy was stable. More than stable, it was improving. New research was being conducted. New technologies were being developed. Species were helping each other without waiting for someone else to take the lead. The culture of dependence that had existed before was transforming into a culture of mutual support. We are not what we were 5 years ago, Velthar said as he summarized the findings. We are not the civilization that needed humans to survive. We have become something new. The question now is, are we ready to meet our teachers as equals? Singer of Dawn stood again. I propose we send a message. Not asking them to return. Not thanking them because they said forgiveness was ours to keep, which means gratitude is also ours to keep. We should not make them feel responsible for us. Instead, we send a simple message. We tell them we understand now. We tell them we are ready. And we invite them to visit, not as guardians but as friends. The chamber erupted in discussion. Some loved the idea. Others felt it was too soon. The debate continued until Archivist Chorus spoke. I am the oldest being in this chamber. I have lived through the human era and the post-human era, and I tell you this. Humanity did not just give us technology and repairs. They gave us a mirror. They showed us what we could be. Species who help each other. Species who sacrifice for others. Species who trust in the potential of those they serve. We honor them not by thanking them, but by becoming them. And that means reaching out in friendship, expecting nothing in return. The vote was called. It was not unanimous. Some species still felt it was too soon. Others worried about what humanity might think of their progress. But the majority agreed. A message would be sent. Crafting that message took 2 more weeks. Every word was debated. Every phrase examined. The message needed to convey understanding without demanding attention. It needed to show growth without seeming arrogant. It needed to extend friendship without obligation. Finally, they settled on something simple. Something very human in its directness. To humanity, wherever you are, we understand now. We know what you did and why you did it. We know what it cost you. We are not asking you to return. We are not asking for anything. We just want you to know that your faith in us was justified. We are standing on our own. We are helping each other. We are becoming the kind of civilization you hoped we would be. When you left, you said we should find you when we were ready. We do not know if we are ready yet, but we wanted you to know we are trying. Come visit us someday, not as teachers or guardians, but as friends. We will be here. We will be waiting. And we will have stories to share, with respect and understanding the Galactic Council. The message was encoded on a probe with the coordinates that humanity had left in Remember's database. The probe was launched from Earth's orbit, humanity's old home sending a message to their new one. It would take years to reach its destination, crossing the vast darkness between galaxies. But time was something the galaxy had learned to be patient with. Life continued. The Keepers grew stronger. More species joined the organization, not just to maintain human systems, but to create new ones. The philosophy of service that humanity had embodied began to spread. Species reached out to help others not for profit or power, but because they could. Captain Thress, now Admiral Thress of the Keeper Fleet, started a new program. Young people from every species could volunteer to serve on vessels that traveled to struggling colonies and offered help. They called themselves gardeners, embracing the human metaphor. They learned to help others in ways that empowered rather than created dependence. Ambassador Velthar retired from active service, but remained an advisor. He spent his final years writing a book about humanity, not a history book or a scientific analysis, but something more personal. A collection of stories about individual humans he had known and what they had taught him. He called it Friends I Never Understood. It became required reading for all Keeper trainees. Remember, the AI on Hesperus 7 became a place of pilgrimage. Young people traveled there to access the archive, to understand the history, to see what dedication and love looked like when acted out over centuries. Remember welcomed them all, answering questions and showing records, serving as a bridge between the past and future. Years passed, then decades. The galaxy continued to grow and change. New technologies were developed. New species were contacted and welcomed into the galactic community. The Keepers helped these young species, using the philosophy they had learned from humanity. Help without controlling, guide without directing, trust in potential rather than judge on current state. And then, 73 years after humanity left, the response came. It arrived at Earth as a small ship, elegant and obviously advanced. The Galactic Council was alerted immediately. Every major species sent representatives to Earth to witness whatever would happen next. The ship landed in the same spaceport where the last human transport had departed 73 years earlier. The airlock opened and a woman stepped out. She was elderly, with silver hair and kind eyes. She wore simple clothes, nothing official or formal. She looked around at the city humans had left behind, now maintained by the Keepers, and smiled. "It looks good," she said. "You have taken care of it." Velthar was too old to travel, but he watched through holographic projection. His hearts recognized the woman even before his mind did. "Sarah?" "Hello, old friend," she said, looking at his projection. "I told you I would see you again. I just did not know it would take this long." She was not alone. More humans emerged from the ship, young and old, representing the generations that had been born in their new galaxy. They looked around with wonder and curiosity, seeing the civilization their ancestors had saved. "We received your message," Sarah said to the assembled council representatives. "It took a long time to reach us, and then we debated for years about how to respond. Some thought we should stay away longer. Others wanted to rush back immediately. But eventually we decided to do what felt right. We came to visit. Just a small delegation. We do not want to interfere. We just wanted to see how you were doing." Chancellor Morvik, who had led the council through the crisis and the recovery, stepped forward. She was old now too, her scales dulled with age. "You are welcome here. Not as our saviors or our teachers, as our friends. That," Sarah said, her eyes bright with tears, "is all we ever wanted to be." The visit lasted 3 months. Humans traveled across the galaxy, seeing the worlds they had protected. They met the Keepers and learned about the organization. They saw the innovations and improvements. They watched the galaxy functioning without them. Sarah spent most of her time on Hesperus 7 with Remember, reviewing the records and seeing what the galaxy had learned. On the last day of her visit, she stood in the archive chamber with Velthar's holographic projection beside her. "We were so afraid," Sarah admitted. "Afraid that leaving was a mistake. Afraid that everything would fall apart. Afraid that we had wasted 300 years on a civilization that would destroy itself the moment we left." "You were wrong to fear," Velthar said gently. "You taught us well." Not with lectures or commands, but with example. You showed us what it meant to care for others. We learned. You did more than learn, Sarah said. You became teachers yourselves. The Gardener program, the Keeper's philosophy, the way you welcomed new species to the galactic community. That is all you. We showed you what was possible, but you made it real. So what happens now? Velthar asked. Will you stay? Will you return to your new galaxy? Sarah smiled. We will go home, but we will come back to visit. And you should visit us too. Bring delegations. Share stories. Trade ideas. But not as students and teachers. As neighbors. As friends. The universe is big enough for all of us. On the day the human delegation prepared to leave, thousands gathered at the spaceport to say goodbye. Not to beg them to stay, but to wish them well. Young gardeners shook hands with elderly humans who had worked on the Salvation Mandate. Scientists exchanged contact information to collaborate on research. Children played together, the first generation born free of the secrets that had defined the past. Sarah stood at the airlock of her ship, looking back at the crowd. Velthar's holographic form stood nearby, too old and weak to be there in person but determined to see her off. Thank you for everything, Velthar said, not just for saving us but for trusting us. That was the greater gift. Thank you for understanding, Sarah replied. That is what we needed most, to know that you understood why we did what we did. We understand, Velthar said, and we are trying to be worthy of that understanding. You already are, Sarah said. Then she stepped through the airlock and the human ship lifted into the sky. Velthar watched until the ship jumped to FTL and vanished from his sensors. He was crying, he realized, not from sadness but from something else. Completion, perhaps, or peace. They came back, he said to no one in particular. They did not have to, but they came back. Of course they did, said Remember's voice in his communication implant. That is what friends do. Velthar returned to his home and sat in his favorite chair. He was very old now, and he knew his time was coming to an end. But he was content. He had lived to see humanity return. He had lived to see the galaxy learn to stand on its own. He had lived to see the transformation from dependence to independence to mutual friendship. That night, Velthar died peacefully in his sleep. His last thought was of Sarah, young and laughing as she taught him English phrases all those years ago. His second to last thought was that he had been very lucky to live in interesting times. His third to last thought was gratitude. The galaxy continued. Humans visited occasionally, and galactic delegations traveled to humanity's new home. Trade routes were established. Cultural exchanges happened. Research collaborations produced amazing discoveries. But it was all between equals now. No hidden agendas, no secret guardians, just species trying to make the universe a little better. One act of kindness at a time. On Hesperus 7, Remember maintained the archive. But the AI also started a new section, not records of what humanity had done, but records of what the galaxy was doing. Acts of service, examples of species helping each other, proof that the lesson had been learned and was being passed forward. The file grew larger every year. In another galaxy, a grandmother sat with her grandchildren and told them stories of the Milky Way, of the friends she had known there, of the civilization she had helped save, of the day she went back and saw what they had become. Will we go back? One grandchild asked. Someday, the grandmother said. When you are older, there are friends waiting there for you. Good people who have learned to help each other. You will like them. Are they like us? Another grandchild asked. The grandmother smiled. She thought about the Kryn and their warrior poetry, the Zephrati and their beautiful music, the Selkoth and their deep philosophy, all the species she had known and loved. No, she said. They are not like us. They are like themselves, and that is wonderful. Far above, the stars continued their eternal dance. Two galaxies spinning through the void, each home to civilizations that had learned the same lesson. That the greatest power was not in ruling or conquering or even in helping. The greatest power was in trusting, in believing that others could be better than they were, in having faith that love given freely would return transformed into love given forward. The stars fell silent when humanity left, but now they sang again a different song, a song of species standing on their own, a song of friendship without obligation, a song of a galaxy that had learned to fly, and in that song, if you listened carefully, you could hear gratitude. not spoken aloud because the humans had asked for no thanks, but present nonetheless in every act of kindness, in every moment of service, in every choice to help another, without asking for anything in return. The galaxy was beautiful. The galaxy was kind. The galaxy was worthy. And somewhere humanity smiled.